Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about The Boys Season 3, Episode 6. It is called Herogasm. So full spoilers for the episode. As always, the glorious return of the love sausage. Depending on your perspective, I suppose. If you're MM, it's not that glorious. But yeah, so this episode features an annual annual orgy party thrown by Soups, mostly C-listers, as it's mentioned in the episode. But Frenchie's, of course, disappointed he doesn't get to be there, as we're told by two different characters. But yeah, so obviously that's the big headline thing. That's what you kind of come into this talking about, is the ridiculous over the top orgy. But honestly, this was such a great culmination episode of so many things that are going on this season. With a big action sequence at the end that was very intense and had a lot of weight to it because of the characters finally getting to fight. And I'm not even talking about Soldier Boy and Homelander, which is a big deal in and of itself, and is fun to see them actually just sort of go at it, and not so much for the fight itself, but more for the idea that Homelander's finally not just winning. And in many ways, this might be the first real fight he's ever had, because everything's came so easy to him his entire life. But more so for the inclusion of Billy, and then eventually Huey. But Billy, blasting him with a heat vision, and Homelander being like, "Oh, what did you do?" And then it becoming this 2-on-1 fight, and then eventually 3-on-1 when Huey jumps in. And again, that also shocks Homelander. There's kind of this, like, he's caught off guard. They actually kind of kick his ass a little bit. And he flies away at the end, of course, before he's able to, before Soldier Boy is able to go nuclear on him. But he's taken a beating for the first time I've really seen in the show, in a physical sense. And I'm sure his ego is very bruised after this. Which is also dangerous, because now he's aware of this threat, which might make him even more volatile, more dangerous, and just everything afterwards. But there's a lot of really satisfying moments in there, like his reaction to Billy with the powers. It's something as simple as like the heat vision battle, where they're both shooting the laser eyes at each other, and Homelander's in the air, and you've got the classic video game style, both beams meeting in the middle and like going back and forth a little bit. That's a super cliched thing, right? That's a super cliched thing. But I think what sticks out here is that it doesn't matter in this moment. It actually feels like a huge moment, because what it represents. It represents Billy standing equal footing in a fight with Homelander. Now, he can't fly, seemingly, but he does have seemingly super strength and, of course, the heat vision. So this is such a big deal, because we've been building since episode 1 that he can't stand a chance in a physical fight against Homelander. And now here, after 2 and almost a full third season now, we're 6 out of 8 episodes, he is able to do it and show strength and fight back. And then Huey as well, and we'll talk about some great Huey and A-Train stuff in this episode as well. So I really enjoyed this fight, because the actual dramatic weight, the character weight of like finally getting to see this and having these characters finally be able to like stand toe to toe with them, not necessarily for all the right reasons, but it was very invigorating because of that. And it was good pop moments when each character came into the fight. So good stuff. And then the things that spiral out of that, right? So you've got all this Herogasm stuff going on. You've got all the things going into it. You have the Starlight, Huey, and both of those things kind of go into their own thing as well, which I both really like, and they also feel like a culmination. I talked about last week how Huey was kind of suffering from this idea of masculinity and being emasculated, and that was kind of driving some of his decisions in an unhealthy way right now. And again, this is not a super original thing, but it's really effective when it's done well at the right time. But the whole joke where he teleports her out of the orgy, and they're both naked because of that. Although that does call into question how the power works, because he can hold on to someone and take them with him, but his clothes which are on him don't go with that. That's a little bit weird, but whatever. I'll go with it, because the story and what the characters are going through are more important than little details like that. But it did make me question it for a brief second. But this idea that they're naked. They're both butt ass naked when he's finally admitting how he feels, and it's all out in the open. Literally, they're all out in the open. It's a very on the nose narrative technique to have them be naked for that scene, but it's effective and it works. And these two characters don't tend to be naked in the show by and large. They're not the raunchy characters, and even in this scene, they hide the nudity, partly probably because the actors didn't want to be nude, but on camera, but also just because they're a little bit different to some of the other characters, in that we sort of hold them in a they're not. I guess what I'm saying is that a show like this has red shirts for being naked, as opposed to the leads. Does that make sense? Dirty red shirts, we'll call them. But yeah, like, so him finally admitting that he feels this way, Starlight kind of pointing out that he said on the very first date they ever had, this didn't bother him, that she was more powerful, but clearly sometimes it does. And it's gotten to him over this time they've been together. And what's interesting about this clash is that, obviously we have this clash between Billy and MM, and MM calls him out in that as well, and calls him a hypocrite. As was set up last week, he gets to have Homelander, but he can't have Soldier Boy. What's so good about the way these two things sort of spiral off out of this in this episode is that you've got Huey as an example of someone who's become more corrupted, is willing to accept Billy's teachings of we have to keep doing bad things because the ends justify the means. And on the flip side, you've got Starlight, who this episode goes through a really good little arc of kind of solidifying that she is sick of being told she has to do bad things. She says that to Newman when Newman kind of reveals that she's figured out that Huey knows about her power. Is a little threatening, makes her this offer to work together to take down Homelander. But Starlight is like, pop my head or leave, because I'm sick of like playing dirty because that's the way people are telling me that it's supposed to be done. And this ties way back into season 1. This ties back. One of my favorite moments of season 1 is at the end of the season when she says, "I'm an effing superhero," where she's like, "No, I'm going to show up and save these guys because I'm a good person, because I'm supposed to be saving people." Is what the whole point of this is. And everyone muddies it up and dirties it and puts all these qualifiers into things and makes it all about protecting their image. And even if there was good intentions to begin with, everyone has diluted it with the system that you have built. And obviously the critique of the modern world, the satire here is very much there. I mean, hell, Homelander's complaining about the fake news when he's on the TV program this episode. Like, the show has never been subtle with these things, but I think it's so important. I understand that Starlight in the comics, like, I've not read the comics, but I understand that Starlight's not as big a part in the comics, and it's amazing to me in this episode that her and MM are so important, because part of what makes this show work so well is that you do have the heart, and you have these truly good, noble characters that you can kind of count on, and it's uplifting when Starlight convinces MM to give up trying to fight a fight that he can't win with Soldier Boy when he's beating up Homelander, to come and help survivors of the explosion, which is obviously Soldier Boy did that when he encountered the twins. Like, I think that is such an important part of the show, is this heart, and this idea that someone in the show, Starlight specifically, is trying to be Superman, right? She's trying to be that, and she's trying to not be corrupted by the bullshit around her. And even Huey is being corrupted by. Even Huey was the one earlier this season telling her that, "Oh, you have to like go along with this plan and pretend to be okay with Homelander because we're going to find this weapon." Even earlier this season, it was Huey that was telling her, "You have to do certain things in order to achieve this end goal. This is worth the end goal." And this is her episode saying, "No, F that. I'm not doing this anymore." It's seeing these people get hurt. It's Huey being partly responsible and not helping her when she asked, and then not only that, but actually teleporting her out and then claiming that he saved her. He claims that he saved her by teleporting her away, when she can make her own decisions. She wants to help people. She wants to save the others who are there. It's not just about saving people she knows, it's about saving anyone who needs saving. And it's not like this is a party full of like people. Oh, I mean, some of them, like, I think there's an implication from MM that maybe there's a bunch of sex workers there who are maybe even not loving all this weird shit that's being done to them, but they're doing it for the pay. And there's a bit of an implication that not everyone there is a soup or even like into what's going on. Not that it's consensual per se, but there's some kind of grey area kind of poking in. forgive that phrasing, given that there's obviously a lot of sex puns that could be made about this. But there's a lot of supers who do a lot of bad things, and we see some of them, meet some comeuppance this episode. So I think Starlight being this heart, this core of the show, and sort of like bringing that out of MM when MM wants to give up, like when she talks to him early in the episode. And I love that they're interacting more, because they're two characters who didn't interact much, and it was really exciting back early in season 2, I think it was, where they did get to interact a little bit more, and it was like, oh, I think MM might actually really like Starlight. like her good nature is going to appeal to him because he's that kind of guy. And seeing them here and seeing her talk him out of, because he wants to, as he puts it, F the high road. I'm so sick of being the one who has to like make the right choice. Everyone else is doing all this shit, and her being able to like break through him by the end. Even he gives his backstory. He talks about how his grandfather died, his family died with Soldier Boy. Like even when Soldier Boy and MM are staring at each other, and and MM wants to do it. He wants to just throw down, even though he doesn't stand a chance. There's nothing he can do. And even the moment where Billy holds him back because he's like not going to let MM through, and MM can't get past him because Billy's got superpowers right now. He's got the strength, so his hand on his chest is enough to just hold him back. And hell, that kind of symbolizes the whole hypocrisy of the whole thing in many ways. Obviously, you've got all the literal things going on, but this idea that he is actually using this extra power that he has gained, the superpower, to hold MM back for his own gain, means that Billy has just... So if you're going to compare this to politics, say, right, and the power of being a politician and gaining power in politics, the idea that Billy has been raging against the system, but the first chance he got to actually get some of that power for himself, he's now using it to, in some way, keep the other person down. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a little bit of heart in some of these moments as well. Billy telling Soldier Boy, no, not him, and like make sure that he doesn't hurt MM. Billy telling Huey to go right before Soldier Boy's going to blow up for Homelander's sake. It obviously doesn't happen, but like the idea that he tells Huey to get lost because he doesn't want Huey to get hurt. There's even in Billy, there's these moments of humanity. There's these moments of he does give a shit about the people around him, even though he's a complete prick. He's a right C word, to borrow his own phrase, because he is, and he admits it. That's kind of his thing. So all that stuff was really good. All this is like popping off, not the heads, but all this is popping off around each other, which is part of what makes this final 25 minutes maybe of this episode just exhilarating, is like payoff. And I've not even talked about the Huey and A-Train bit yet, which had a phenomenal setup, because the A-Train plot this season has been interesting, but it's not necessarily been like next level necessarily. This episode elevated it immensely. I thought the scene with Ashley earlier on, where he comes in and he wants to yell about was it Blue Hawk? I think I fell in to get the guy's name right before he died. He wants something done about Blue Hawk and what he did to his brother. He starts yelling about it. Ashley's playing along, and then Ashley just loses her shit and pulls out a chunk of her hair and calls him out. And it's basically what I was saying last week, is that like obviously what's happened to his brother is awful, but it's hard to get sympathy for A-Train specifically because of all the awful things that he's done. And Ashley just says, look, I've covered up like 3 murders for you, and all of a sudden, because it's affected you care, and I'm supposed to give a shit. Go F yourself. Like, it was like she was speaking truth. This was just spouting truth. Like, Ashley's not a character that I necessarily think is like, she's such a weasel in how she like kisses up to people, but this was a moment of like, yeah, go Ashley. like it finally felt like she was having an awakening. And there was that moment last episode where she almost like talked some truth with Starlight about how Homelander is, and she chickened out of it. This was maybe like another sign that she's kind of inching towards, and maybe A-Train's obviously not as scary as Homelander, so that's why. And the notable thing is that A-Train doesn't say much back. He doesn't have much of a comeback. He's confronted with all the bullshit he's done. And I love this scene on its own, but the second he runs into Huey at that orgy, and he's there looking for Blue Hawk, because Blue Hawk's there obviously being a sleaze. He tries to hit on Starlight a little bit at one point. Or it isn't hit on her per se, but he sort of talks down to her, and he's chauvinistic. Anyway, but Huey runs into A-Train, and A-Train cracks a joke about him being there, or whatever. And there's this moment where you can see it in Huey's face that he's just realized, wait a minute, I have superpowers right now. This is the first time he's been able to interact with A-Train whilst he's on Temp V. and he confronts him, and he asks him, so, you never said sorry. You never said sorry about Robin. And A-Train says, oh, really, we're doing this now? And he takes off his visor, and what I love about this is that the scene with Ashley completely put all this on his mind, because he didn't have a comeback for that, so he's probably been thinking about what she said to him all day. And then Huey, the victim, well, Robin was the victim, but he's a victim by proxy. He's the loved one of a victim. He's the one who's alive to like feel the pain of what happened to the victim. He demands an apology, or doesn't even demand. He just says, "You never apologized." And A-Train, and it sounds like a little insincere the first time he says it, and it's like he's trying to be a dick about it. But then the more he repeats it, the more genuine it becomes, and the more it sounds like he's actually saying sorry. And I think what's impressive is last week I said, like, how do you redeem A-Train? And honestly, I think in one episode it's kinda touched on it. Like, I'm not saying he's completely like redeemed or anything as of yet, but I think this moment felt genuine, and it kind of felt like it starts with an apology. It starts with him realizing what he did was wrong. I mean, it really is that simple, and seeing that he has to become better. And it's interesting that this happens right after he's done something else awful. He just before the bad thing with his brother, he turned on Super Soaker, right? And that got him killed. So he got another person murdered effectively. And there's got that Starlight kind of gives him a look, which is like, I'm warning you. You don't deserve it, but I'm warning you to piss off. All of this was like all this so condensed together. This stuff with Huey Starlight, Huey A-Train, Starlight MM, and then of course the Soldier Boy, Homelander, Billy fight. Like all of this stuff condensed so close together was exhilarating. This was like maybe 25 of the show's best minutes. I always say it's the best because season 2 had some real big highs towards the end as well. Like, there's been great stuff before, absolutely. But this was a lot of culmination, and so much of it is built up because we've been waiting 2.7 seasons or whatever the decimal works out to be at 6 out of 8. It really was good. I suppose technically it's 3/4. I could have just said that, but it doesn't. What doesn't matter? It doesn't matter. Don't worry about the math. The math's not important. What's important is the emotions and the feelings that we're having. And obviously I need to talk about all the funny stuff and the sex stuff. I'll just mention them. I loved Starlight trying to talk about how good MM is at going down on a girl, and she describes it as he just munches on that vagina and then goes num 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 num, which was that's the sound you make when you're trying to get like a baby to eat or something. You say num num num. Like, I don't know, it was really silly. I love the return of the Starlight vibrator because she sees it being used and is like, ugh. That was funny. Ant-Man dude being stepped on by Homelander, of course, was funny, but Ant-Man dude clearly just came out, I think, of a woman, was covered in, I'll just say fluid, like wipes like a big chunk of it on MM's jacket, which he's not happy about, and then he tries to get to a bathroom, and when he opens a door, he gets a mother of all sploogies on him. He gets what looks like I don't know. I mean, what was the superpower from this guy exactly? That just like shot like what looks like about 5 gallons of jizz on him. I don't know. Like, I mean, you would think is he just a really big guy, so he's got big balls and he's got a big penis, and he just oh, is this love sausage? Is it maybe love sausage is load? I don't necessarily know why the penis being that long and like snake like would necessarily lead to more jizz per se, but maybe. I don't think it matters ultimately, but it's fun to speculate. Starlight walking in on the deep with the octopus. Obviously silly, funny, disgusting, all the above. But obviously it harkens back to what he did to her. So the idea that she walks in and him doing something sexually embarrassing is, and using it and getting a photo of it is kind of a, I wouldn't say a comeuppance per se, but there's definitely like a callback to that, and there's almost a sad like kind of like the sort of dark part of this is that when she hears him sorry, I didn't mean that, but when she hears him speaking and making noises and enjoying the octopus sex or whatever is going on. But the sad dark part of that is that she probably remembers him making some similar grunts and phrases and things from when he assaulted her. So there's the kind of that sort of real part of it, and then of course the silliness of it being the octopus. And the show's very good at bouncing around these types of things. So yeah, all that funny stuff. Was there anything else I wanted to point out from the orgy? I'm sure there's a couple of things to mention. There's the guy with the freeze powers who makes the ice dildo. Other stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of nudity. That wasn't obvious from the description. So no, all that stuff was great. I guess I should rewind a little bit and just mention a couple of things that led up to this. Deep still kissing up to Homelander. Homelander probably isn't happy that there's no one left in the crime division because the Deep has to control the computer. He's upset that Black Noir disappears on him, and we know that he was part of Soldier Boy's team. But also, you have the kind of the speculation this episode. The twins say that Black Noir was behind it, like he was like the ringleader of like arranging this takedown of Soldier Boy, which is interesting. It's interesting that Black Noir is like getting some meat from a story perspective, where in season 3 he's finally getting a little bit of like, oh, this is his thing, and we can kind of delve into that a little bit. It's very curious. I think Soldier Boy as a character is quite interesting because we get a lot of him with Billy and Huey in like a motel, and he's eating the cheeseburger or whatever, and there's some jokes about him not knowing the internet or anything like that. I think what's interesting about the character is that he is like an asshole in many ways. He clearly is a man of a different time. He looks down on talk about toxic masculinity, the way he talks about fathers walking with their babies and things like that. He has very kind of dated and I imagine very problematic in places, like thoughts on the world. But I did think it was interesting that when Huey talks about what happened in New York and the people that died, he gets mad and doesn't want to talk about it, but then he does kind of open up a little and makes it clear that he didn't mean to do it. And he does kind of seem genuinely remorseful at what happened to people. So it feels like they're building a character who's not as bad as Homelander. At least right now, it doesn't seem that way. It seems like he is an asshole who's just out for himself. He's selfish. All the things that come with power, he's let corrupt him, and he's a complete turd about the whole thing. But it does seem that he's not necessarily as much of an evil monster as Homelander is, and I'm just getting that from that exchange. Maybe we'll develop that a little bit. The show does a good job at sort of like fleshing out our characters to give them a bit more than just being simple, A or B. Homelander speaking in the mirror was a fun little bit. This idea that he might just shed the notion that he can be loved and that he'll just take away the human part of him that's left. The idea that this is like right after he feels the betrayal of Black Noir abandoned him, and that everyone abandons him, and it's their fault, it's not his fault. The persecution complex that we're dealing with. So all good stuff. And it's almost, I almost forget to even bring it up, honestly, because it is so separate. But we do have the Frenchie and Chemical stuff with Nina, which gets very violent. They kidnap Chemical from the hospital, and they're trying to give Frenchie a choice of to either kill her or kill the the girl that he was with at the start of the show that Nina's after. And they've got Frenchie naked, and you've got Nina tearing him down, sort of talking about all these scars that he has, how much of a sex fiend he was, and how much of a good like sort of assassin he was, and things like just basically just bringing up all these things that sound like a different person to who we know from the present day. It's certainly who Chemical knows in Frenchie. And so much of this plot has been Chemical struggling with this idea of who she is and not wanting to be a monster. And after she does sort of break out of the chair and kills the two guards, and she does this without powers seemingly. Although she takes some pretty nasty hits, I do wonder if her powers are kind of starting to like intermingle a little bit. But either way, it feels like she then questions like, "Am I just the monster anyway? Was it not the powers? Am I just awful?" And Frenchie tries to talk her down. And he talks about running from his past, and she said it's not his fault. So there's a lot of idea of, I think that the idea of growth is a very interesting one to introduce here, and the possibility that A-Train might be learning and moving forward, and the possibility that maybe Soldier Boy could, or just the opposite, that Huey seems to be going in a bad direction, but you've got possibly Frenchie and Kimiko trying to be good and trying to like move into like a better place for themselves, does thematically strike some interesting ideas that they coincide with what else is going on with the other characters. I think mainly just the notion that can you sort of make amends for your past? Can you become someone else? Can you become someone better? That kind of thing. And there are obviously a good bit of heart to the show as well. They've always been kind of dislikable. Kimiko's always felt like this innocent character who wants to be better and so on. It does feel very separate right now, to the point where it kind of like you almost wanted to get back to the Herogasm stuff when it cut to this. So that's a slight complaint, I guess, in that sense. But certainly, I do see how some of the themes are kind of like tying into things, and you're kind of hoping that the entire group gets back together somehow, although right now they couldn't feel more split apart. So the two big things towards the end I do have to address is one, A-Train's conclusion with Blue Hawk, in which he drags him at super speed across concrete. The symbolism of how he kills Blue Hawk is not lost on me. I won't get into it, but certainly there's some historical significance to that. But it also looked great. Like, it looked brutal. And of course it leaves him like having like heart palpitations, or he's on the ground. I don't think he's dead. Like, I'm sure A-Train will be back up, but we know that he's at risk every time he runs at super speed, but he takes the risk to do this when he sees Blue Hawk after the explosion. So really great thrilling sequence. And of course there's a lot to learn here still. This idea that he's lashing out, like, even though this guy obviously is a complete piece of shit. The idea of lashing out with this level of violence is again kind of like going against what Starlight and MM are kind of like representing in the show right now. I mean, MM wants to, of course, but he's talked out of it. So there's this push and pull of doing the right thing, taking the high ground, all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, was the ending with Starlight, where she has MM film her do a live post on Instagram, basically saying superheroes are mostly a bunch of shitheads, and Homelander's the worst. Something's happened to Maeve. They don't care about you. Soldier Boy's back, and he doesn't care about people. And like, I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry. My name is not Starlight. My name is Annie, and I quit. That's kind of this is kind of this cat out the bag at the end of the episode of there's so many ramifications I suspect will come from this, and not everyone will necessarily believe her. I'm sure there'll be like a PR trying to contain things at VOT or whatever, but the idea of this getting out there and this like fight changing the shape a little bit, because this episode did so much. There was so much of an arc to so much of the characters in this episode, and it feels like it really has changed or shifted the status quo of where we are now. Getting into the next episode, I'm really excited to see how the others do react to this. How does Newman react to this? Who, by the way, did make Annie's nose bleed. She didn't pop her head, but she did make her nose bleed a little bit. Like, maybe she was thinking about it, or almost going to pop her head. She got close, maybe. But yeah, huge ramifications for this, presumably, next episode. The idea that someone's saying the Homelander's a scumbag. Like, I don't know if anyone has outright just said Homelander is the worst of the superheroes and they don't care about you. I don't know if anyone's outright said something that directly about Homelander that's, quite frankly, very true. And we'll see how that plays. And maybe also how the shittier side of society actually tries to like say it's not real and stick up for Homelander. I'm sure there's a lot of satire we can get from that. But very curious, and just how Homelander's going to react now, both to that, but also the idea that Soldier Boy's out there and that he thinks he maybe could lose. Like, you know, he flew away, he got away, but like they were able to kick the shit out of him, and he had to run away with his tail between his legs. Not literally, because there was actually at least one lady at the orgy who did have a tail, so worth mentioning that. But yeah, so no, great episode, best episode of the season so far, and I think it's important that the last two episodes I thought were really good, and they both set up and made this like an epic payoff to those last few. So I'm really excited about the last couple of episodes. I'll say this, you know, after the last two seasons, especially season 2, I'm definitely seeing a little bit of a formula to the writing, but not in a bad way. I'm seeing, I got this like feeling at the end of this where I was like, oh, like Kripke and Co, they know how to write a show. They know how to make things feel like they're a payoff to the build up that's been happening, and things both in season 2 and 3 I think have felt better and better as the seasons went on, and it doesn't always work that way with TV writing, so I actually really appreciate that. I love feeling more rewarded with each episode as I go towards the end. So maybe formula wasn't the right word. That probably made it sound negative. I just mean that I'm like, this has happened at least 2 seasons in a row now where I'm feeling more positive as each episode passes, and I feel like it gets better with each episode. And we'll see if season 3 continues that. I mean, it's got 2 more episodes, maybe it won't, but the trend is going the right way, pretty much. So good stuff. So let me know what you thought of this episode of The Boys in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All that stuff helps out a lot. If you want to support more directly, of course, you can hit the super thanks button, or go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us for as little as $1 per month and help keep all the content coming. So thank you very much for joining me. I will see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?